I think a very well articulated session. I think the concept of strategy came out very clear. And I understand that you're here now after a gap of, here in India after a gap of 14 years. So what are your first impressions coming to India? What changes do you see? And how excited are you about the future of India? What challenges do you think India faces? And I'm sure you've read that the government of India has taken a very aggressive transformation agenda to create economic empowerment for the people of the country. What kind of opportunities and challenges do you see for India in this journey?
Well, that's a big question, and when I'm in Delhi tomorrow, we will have an extended discussion of that. I'm not a deep expert on India. I have not done or led a major strategy project for the country, but I have a great team, and we have some perspectives on that. I think the country is in a very different place than it was 14 years ago, so that's good. I remember back then we were still obsessing about electricity. That was the issue that everybody wanted to talk about, and I'm sure there's still improvements that can be made, but I think the country's gotten on a pretty good path. The growth is quite robust and quite impressive. The growth rate difference with China is closing, and maybe we'll pass China. And I'm rooting for India. In fact, I'm really rooting for India. You have to win. We need this incredibly complicated democracy to win. I think there's a GDP per capita is growing quite robustly. It's quite impressive, and there's been many improvements. And I think, and again, we'll talk extensively about this tomorrow. I think that many of the steps that the government is taking are really crucial steps. That said, although the momentum now is there, I think the momentum is moving in the right direction. Building an economy this large and this complex and this spread out into really a world-class, highly competitive economy, moving from the 5,000 GDP per capita or 5 to 6 up to 10 or 15 or 20, which is what you aspire to, is an enormously complicated and multifaceted challenge. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we'll be talking about many of those key steps. The business environment in India is better, but it's still not good. You rank 130th on the World Bank's Doing Business report because there's just still too much complexity in doing business here. It's better, but we got a ways to go there. The infrastructure's better, but it's not good. And if we're going to be efficient and able to really compete in the global economy and even within India, we're going to have to make our infrastructure much more efficient here. I think this move towards a sort of harmonized tax system is a really phenomenally important step forward. We've got to create really one Indian economy where the states really, there's incredible trade and competition among the states. That's the magic of the United States, is that we have all these states, but the states are competing fiercely to improve their business environment, to attract companies to them, to raise the quality of their human resources. And I think in order to get that internal competition and differentiation across the Indian states, we're going to need to simplify a lot of rules, harmonize the taxes, open up the infrastructure so that it's much easier to move stuff around this country. I think the only way a big country can really be highly productive and highly successful is it's got to get broken down into a lot of smaller units. where you have leaders that are focusing not on this whole incredible country, but this state or this metropolitan area, this city. And you need to differentiate across the country in economic policy. So, you know, those are some highlights. This is a very long discussion that I think we probably can't have here, but I'm very, very excited to be here. I think I wish I would have come earlier, but I'm very happy I'm here right now. I think there's an opportunity that is extraordinary, and I think the momentum now is there, and the question is, how do we kind of keep pushing the reforms and keep building on the deficits that still exist and keep simplifying the game, the rules. That, I think, still is a big challenge, but I think this country is on its way. And hopefully we can all keep a unity and a sense of purpose and not get tangled up in internal divisions. You know, we in the United States are facing a very bad time right now because we're fighting among ourselves. And we're not the kind of united American, you know, country and citizens that we historically have been. You know, we're in a very divisive period. As a result, we're not making progress. Politics has taken over, not progress. You know, the Republicans try to stop the Democrats, and the Democrats try to stop the Republicans. It's not the Republicans and the Democrats trying to move the country forward. So we've got to make sure that we don't fall into the trap of divisiveness and fighting among ourselves. But I see some positive signs there as well. So again, my general feeling is excitement. It's a wonderful time for me to be here, and I'm really looking forward to meeting your leaders face to face and seeing what I think, and also hopefully helping if I can.
Great, thank you. So the good news is that you know, a lot of what you're saying, we're actually seeing it play out in India. You spoke about the competitiveness amongst various states. Now that's a intervention that the government has made over the last 2-3 years, and that I think is doing very well to reform the administrative processes and the policy framework at the state level. So you have both the center and the state doing it, and infrastructure is clearly a focus. So I think it's good. So just touching upon a specific issue as far as India faces, and it's actually a global issue today. We have a lot of youth coming into the job market, and what we are experiencing is a jobless growth because of various factors, particularly technology, the impact of technology. And the marketplace is getting even more competitive. And every enterprise is saying that it must be extremely competitive to survive. And you spoke about the interlinkages between corporates, and you touched upon it. I know you have a session a little later, and society. And we in ITC, the company I represent, we call that responsible competitiveness. We have taken a view about 2 decades back to say that our performance metric is no more shareholder value, it's the triple bottom line. And every business unit is asked to report on that. But there is a challenge that I think enterprises face today in the area of dealing with the societal challenge of creating jobs and being competitive. So what kind of strategic options do you think enterprises have before them that can try and deal with both the challenges of competitiveness and also addressing this issue of the societal challenge of employment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right that you know, India is, in a way, has a great strength because you've got demographic growth. You know, you have a workforce that is continuing to grow. You've got young people. You've got capacity. You know, a lot of other countries in the world are shrinking. And shrinking sounds nice for a while, but you know, it's hard. And so, you know, Japan is really struggling, and parts of Europe are really struggling. The U.S., we still have demographic growth, which I think is one of our great strengths that hopefully we can take advantage of. But in India, the population growth is still high. It seems the rate of growth is slowing down, and that's a very positive sign, and that's a natural reflection of better education and better opportunity, and so hopefully that transformation will continue. But still, you got a lot of people that are going to need jobs, and there's a lot of concern right now in the world that there's just not going to be enough jobs. And most people think the issue is technology because you can automate more of work. You don't need as much manual work, and that's true. But I would tell you that, you know, from my perspective, a country with a GDP per capita at your level, if you can double your GDP per capita, all of these 1.3 billion people in India, there's lots of needs that they have. There's lots of services that they need to be better. There's lots of goods, lots of better housing, lots of better healthcare, lots of better everything. So there's a tremendous needs in this country. So what you've got to do is you've got to get the ball rolling so that you can start to create the underpinnings of rising prosperity and more of those needs getting met. And right now, that engine is not cranking as fast as it could, but it will continue, I think, to hopefully progress. You are now growing. The economy is growing. But you know, right now, the growth rate and the evolution of the economy is not spinning out quite enough jobs. But don't get caught into thinking that there's some kind of a fixed amount of demand in the world. And you know, we're all doomed because there's only so much demand, and who's going to meet that demand is, you know, we're going to fight each other. There's a lot of needs in the world, and there's a lot of needs in India. I think your real growth is, much of it's going to be domestic. We've seen that in other large economies like this. There's just a tremendous opportunity to grow domestically. I mean, you know, you drive outside down the street, right out here, and you can look out the window, and there's needs everywhere. And the first order is to create an economy and a set of companies that are efficient and effective to start meeting those needs, and that's going to take an enormous workforce. And much of the modern economy is services. And robots don't do services, or not very many of them. You know, you need people to perform service functions. And so we can't get afraid of no jobs. We have to create, what the problem is, we've got to create the education, the skill in the workforce, to start that positive cycle of meeting new needs, meeting needs of more citizens. Therefore, we'll need more companies, more services, and more employment. We got to start that cycle, and I think this country has a long way to go. And I think you should see, like, this is still a very emerging economy, and it's going to get much, much bigger, much, much bigger. And again, unless the growth rate, if we can keep that growth rate moving in a good direction of stable, moderate growth of population, I think the opportunity to employ you know, many, many, many more citizens is in front of us. But in order to do that, we got to get all the obstacles out of the way. We got to open up competition, strip away all the complexities of starting a business. I was doing a tour yesterday of, I won't go through the details of what I was touring, but what I was overwhelmed with in that tour was just how complicated everything is here. It's awesome. I mean, I couldn't even understand some of the complications. They were so complicated. And so look, we strip all that away, and we can start building little companies to meet the needs that are everywhere here. I think this country can grow for many years to come. So I think again, if we can just focus on that and also avoid divisiveness, avoid fighting among ourselves. Don't let politics defeat the country like it is in America. I think this country has a very bright future, and I think the government now is taking some fairly forceful actions that at least I believe are on the right track. So let's build that incredible economy with these incredibly talented people that we all know we can build here. That, I think, that's the way to deal with the employment problem.
So that's a very encouraging words, and I just like to add to that as an example from the enterprise I come from, on a strategic choice that our enterprise made. So one of the choices we made is that when we look at a business to fulfill our triple bottom line objectives, we will look at very clearly, and it's very important for an economy like India, we will look at inclusive growth. And I must see how the components of the entire value chain, which are outside my enterprise, actually benefit from the business I'm doing. And one of the examples is our paper business. You know, in the mid-90s, the entire amount of pulp was, India did not have the technology to make pulp. We used to import pulp. And there were restrictions in the way you could grow forest. The regulations are very different. It's very, you corporates cannot get into that. So we pioneered this whole concept of agro and social forestry. And today we have about 600,000 acres, or about 250,000 hectares under that, creating about 110 million man-days of employment. Ultimately, the jobs are fewer in the mill than they are outside the mill. Mm-hmm. So how do you work with the entire community to improve their productivity and their earning power? And that itself, you know, sets in place, like you said, a virtuous cycle, because they become consumers of other products and services and spur further economic growth. So I think this is just one example of how we can.
And that's a great example, and it's a phenomenal, you know, path you've been on. And I would say there's lots of examples like that. There's a lot. We'll talk about this when we talk about shared value. There's a lot of what goes on outside of the company in the business environment that actually the company can influence in a very, very positive way to enhance the business, make it more efficient, make it more effective. But that creates that positive cycle with the community. And you know, I think one of the problems we've had in the world for the last 4 or 5 years is that kind of positive cycle with the community has been slowing down. And the communities are getting anxious. And I think business historically has had too narrow a view of how to optimize its performance. And so we'll talk about that again. But I think what you're doing in forestry, you're creating a tremendous revolutionary change in these communities in which you're operating. And that's creating more opportunity for more products and more services and more jobs. And you know, I think we have to understand that, again, if ever you get depressed about jobs, just think about how many needs there are to meet. And the answer is there's lots of needs, and there's global needs. And there's needs to meet in the United States of America that we're not meeting. So it's not the lack of demand. It's making ourselves efficient and effective and holistic and inclusive, as you say, in how we, you know, produce and sell goods and services in this world.
So thank you, Michael. I think this conversation is very interesting. And if time permitted, we could have gone more for longer. But I'm going to leave you with one question.
Yep.
And possibly you could address it in the session on shared value if you're not intending to already.
Yep.
Now, this whole issue about responsible competitiveness, or shared value as you call it, and there are, as you said, there are some fine examples around the world about such exemplary behavior.
Yep.
But I think given the enormity of the challenge that society faces, be it from a perspective of environmental degradation or creating jobs, I think this behavior has to be adopted much faster and by a lot more economic entities of the world.
Yep.
So how do you create markets that incentivize this kind of behavior and accelerate the pace? How do you get consumers? How do you get investors? How do you get policymakers or entire revolution that intensifies this behavior of creating shared value or responsible competitiveness, as we call it? This is a question I would like to leave with you.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely return to that question. I personally believe that what really changes the world to me, in my experience, is ideas. It's ways of understanding and thinking about things differently. And I think this is an area where I think if we can get the business community seeing the opportunity differently, we in business can change everything. And this is my dream, that actually business has not been using its full power as an institution in society, and we can get there. But this is a good question for the later session. Thank you for the
Thank you, Michael.
discussion.
Pleasure speaking to you.
It was great.
Good.